Today we're going to talk about layers for Lambda functions. Lambda layers are very useful and they give us two advantages. First, we can extract some code from our Lambda function into a layer, and then this layer can be used across several functions. So if you have some module or a library and we want to reuse it across several functions and not bundle it with them, we can create a layer and then use it in these functions. The other benefit is that our bundle of our Lambda becomes much smaller. Since we extract the code and put it in a layer, it means the Lambda function will have less code that we'll need to deploy every time we update the function. To learn how layers work, we'll look at this function called demo function. So first, let's get started by looking how it works. This Lambda function accepts one parameter, URL, and that would be a URL of an image. And what this Lambda function does is first downloads this image into a variable, which will be a buffer. Then it calls sizeOf, which is a module from npm that we'll take a look at in a second. And what this module does is returns an object that contains the width and the height of this image. And finally, we call getDirection, which is a very simple function that returns one of three strings. If the width is identical to the height, it will return square. If the width is larger than the height, it will return horizontal. And if the height is larger than the width, it will return the string vertical. So the handler is very simple, only 3 lines, but we use some modules and utilities that we include in our Lambda function at the moment, but we want to extract them into a layer. So first we use sizeOf, which is a function from image size. This is a library installed through npm by running npm install image size. And what it does is simply returns an object that contains the width and the height of the image. We have it currently here in node modules. It's called image size. We want to take this library and extract it into a layer so it won't be part of the bundle of our Lambda function. We also use two functions from the utils file. And this is a file that is also part of our Lambda function at the moment. And it returns two functions. GetImage that uses axios. And what it does is downloads the image and then creates a buffer out of it. And getDirection, which I mentioned earlier, which takes two arguments and then compares them and returns a string. We want to take this utils file and also extract it to our Lambda layer. So the end result should be that we'll have this handler function with the 3 lines that we have here, and all the dependency we use in our handler will be in our layer. And that will give us an opportunity to look at how we can extract node modules into the layer, but also how can we extract and then use code from a regular file, not from an npm module, like we have here with utils. So before we get started, let's take a look at how our function works. If we'll go to here, we can see that there's a test event that accepts a single argument URL. So let's pick a random image. Let's say this one. We'll copy the image address and then pass it to our Lambda function. Now, when we run our function, we get the result vertical. And that is because the height of this image is larger than the width. So our function works. So let's try to take all of the code that we want to extract and separate it into a layer. So first, let's switch to the layers of the AWS console. Currently, we don't have any. Let's create a new layer. We'll call it image utils. When we create a layer, it gives us an option to upload a zip file, which will contain the code of our layer. So let's create a zip file. So in the console, we have an empty folder. So first of all, we want to create an npm package. Now that we created our package, we want to install image size, which we use to extract the width and the height of the image. Then we also want to add axios, which we use to download the image. And finally, we want to create a utils file that is going to contain our 2 functions that we saw earlier. So let's just copy paste these functions into our new file. We'll go back to our function and let's copy the contents of the utils file. Now our layer contains all the code that we want to extract from our Lambda function and load it from the layer. But there's one more thing that we need to do. And the thing is to create a folder named nodejs. And the name of the folder is not accidental. This is the name that Lambda requires us to use when we want to load node modules. So we'll move node modules to the nodejs folder and also the package.json and package.log.json. Once these files are placed in the nodejs folder, we can just assume that when we require a library, it will be required from the nodejs folder node modules. So let's create a zip file which we can upload to our layer. We created our layer.zip file, and now let's create our layer and upload this file that we created. So we'll go back to the console and choose the file that we want to upload. We also need to specify the runtimes that this layer will be compatible with. It should work with Node.js 10 and 12, so we'll add both of them and then create the layer. A layer was created, and as you can see, the layers also have versioning. So this is version 1 of the layer. And that is very convenient because it allows us to use different versions of the same layer across different functions. Let's switch back to our Lambda function and attach the layer that we created. We'll scroll to the top. We'll see that there is an option to list the layers and to add new ones. So let's choose add a layer. Under compatible layers, it should list the layer that we created, image utils. Let's add it. Now that we added the layer and saved the function, we can start getting rid of some of the code that we have that is now part of the layer. So let's see what we can remove. First, we copied the node modules folder with all its contents to our layer, so we no longer need it. We also copied package log.json and package.json, and we also created a utils file that is now under a layer and we no longer need here. So we'll delete all of these files. And now we are left only with the handler and the imports of the code that we're going to use. One last thing that we'll need to change is how we require the utils file. Because when we require it this way, Lambda will try to load it from the same folder. If we want to tell Lambda that we want the utils file from our layer, we need to use the opt folder. This is the folder that will contain the code that we extracted into our layer, excluding the node modules, which we already saw that needs to go to the nodejs folder. So let's try to save and then test our function again. Once again, we get vertical as a result. Let's try it with a different image. We'll now find an image that should return horizontal as the value. Let's try it out. We'll copy image address and pass it as the URL attribute. And once we run it, we get horizontal back. So now our bundle is significantly smaller, and every time we deploy the function, it will work much faster because there's much less code to deploy. That's the first advantage. The second advantage is that now all the code that we have in our layer, we can reuse it across other functions. If we have functions that need to load axios or the image size library, we can just attach the layer that we created to them and use these modules as if they are a part of the Lambda function. The important thing to remember is that we need to place our node modules within a folder called nodejs. And second, when we load files that we created, we have to tell Lambda they're in the opt folder, and then Lambda will know that they should be loaded from our layer. So this is the video for today. We introduced a very powerful concept of AWS Lambda, which is layers. Layers allow us to extract code from a Lambda function into a separate layer and then reuse it across several functions. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button. And also, I'm going to continue uploading videos about different AWS services. So if you would like to receive updates when new videos are posted, please sign up to this channel.